Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Bradley Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Feathr, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Michelle Boggs. Michelle is here from Classy and GoFundMe, and is going to be talking about the social state of giving. We're going to give everybody just a few minutes to get logged in here. I see a lot of people joining as we are waiting. So we'll get started with the content here in just a minute or two. As you're joining in, why don't you jump over to the chat? Let us know where you're joining from. If you want to share your or organization you're joining from, we'd love to see that in the chat and just kind of see who all is joining us and from where today. And I guess Michelle, welcome here. I've got a couple additional housekeeping notes. For everyone who is joining, I'll give these while everyone's giving their responses real quick. Today's webinar is recorded, so whether you're joining us live and or you weren't able to make it, we'll be sure to send out the recording. That also means you don't necessarily have to take feverish notes throughout the presentation. If you want to refer back to something, we'll get it out to you here in the next 24 hours or so. Also, we do really want to keep this as conversational as possible. So, as Michelle's going through the content today, feel free to ask questions throughout. We'll be monitoring the chat, and so if you have any questions or you would like for us to dive deeper, I have no problem taking just a few minutes and interrupting or stopping Michelle and asking a really great question. So feel free to ask those questions throughout. Other than that, I don't have a lot of other housekeeping notes. Michelle, I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for having me, Bradley. It's funny, I apologize for my terrible lighting. I'm at the MGM Casino in Oxon Hills, Maryland. I'm here for the ANA Nonprofit Conference. If anybody in the chat has attended this before, it's focused on the Association of National Advertisers, but this track is specific to nonprofits. And I'm actually here with Feathr, Bradley. Some of your colleagues. I need to go say hi to Aiden. So
Yeah, Aiden's there
apologies
for
that
sure.
my background is a little wonky, but thrilled to be here. Excited to dig into the Social State of Giving report, which is a joint report that we've done at Classy and GoFundMe. QR code is up on the screen. Download it, read it. I'm going to go through it today, but there's tons of awesome nuggets. And like Bradley said, please interrupt me, disagree with me, ask me a question. We want this to be conversational and interactive. But just thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Yeah, so I think I have pretty much the best job in the world. I serve as Classy and GoFundMe's executive nonprofit industry advisor. I've been with the team about 2.5 years now. And before that, for my 20-year career, was a frontline fundraiser. I was with American Heart Association for a long time, LLS, American Red Cross. And then right before coming to Classy, I was president of a children's hospital foundation in Miami. So if you've worked at any of those places, shout out, maybe we know each other. And my role here is really specifically to be that voice of the customer in everything that we create and deploy, all the ways that we help our customers. I really make sure to bring the lens of what truly works, what strategies you can truly implement within your teams when it comes to digital fundraising and beyond. And it's just been a pleasure. I travel a lot on behalf of the organization. So I'm always at conferences and trying to really stay ahead of trends and to make sure that we can really just show up in the best way possible for all of our partners and all of our customers. And excited to walk you through some of this data and this report that we put together that I know is going to inform some of what you're doing in digital marketing, in communications, in storytelling, in thinking about acquisition and things like that. So yeah, you ready to get started? So let me tell you a little bit about Classy and GoFundMe because I find more and more people are not always aware that we combined efforts. So actually almost 3 years ago, GoFundMe acquired Classy. And so you probably know GoFundMe, very household name, known for being synonymous with giving and receiving help. GoFundMe is international. We have about 200 million active users. And then Classy is a fundraising tool for online digital fundraising. So we provide tools for our customers for everything digital. So think peer-to-peer, your main donate button, all of your events, campaigns, crowdfunding, anything that you do online, wanting to make sure that there's a really seamless, modern, frictionless experience for your donors and your constituents. And I was actually a Classy customer at the last two places that I work, so have direct experience with the platform and what it can really do to reach donors where they are and kind of, again, deliver that really modern, amazing giving experience. So together, and over these last 3 years, we've really been laser focused on the power that both of our companies will bring together. And so to bring both sides together, we're working to look at bringing together the organizations that create all of this change. So on the nonprofit side, and with all the people who are eager to make an impact. And so I'll talk a little bit more about some of the tools that we're excited to deliver to the sector. So you can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, we've built a community of over 200 million engaged supporters with over 30 billion given across both platforms. That's with a B, 30 billion, which means that we really do get to support the largest collective giving community in the world. And we want to take that data and those insights and be able to provide the best tools possible. We want to be able to transform them into activated community centered on giving to the causes they care about, especially causes powered by nonprofits. You can go to the next slide. So at GoFundMe, we're always kind of looking around the corner to discover what the future of giving looks like. And we want to be able to ensure these findings with you. And so, like I alluded to in the beginning, this is the first time we've done this type of report, the Social State of Giving report. We've done it in conjunction with GoFundMe. And these findings are not only going to help inform you as nonprofits, but these findings are really helping to inform us around how we're thinking about building products and who our audience is and who we're trying to tap into. And so with this research and report, we've really focused specifically this one on social media and how folks discover, interact with, and share causes they care about online. So a little bit about the report itself. And it was released in the fall, and we'll be sure to share the QR code again. I saw somebody ask about that. So you can go to the next slide. So to kind of kick us off, what we see is that most generations, so everybody except boomers, so your Gen Z, your millennials, and your Gen X, which is me, I always forget about Gen X, the like forgotten generation. All of these generations are talking about charitable causes in real life and online almost equally. So that's fascinating. And I think that's such a shift for our sector. And this really signifies the growing convergence of just our lives being digital and in real life. And when you think about activism, so people are no longer like maybe 5 or 10 years ago having to choose one or the other. So in the past, it might have been, I'm going to attend this peer-to-peer walk on a Saturday. I'm going to raise money for this cause that I really care about. And there wasn't a whole lot of digital interaction with that organization or with other supporters within that organization besides that moment in time at that walk. So we're really seeing that they all kind of blend together. And the more that you can create those opportunities and engagements, obviously, the better off you're going to be. So people are taking these in real life conversations also into their online communities and vice versa. So there's this amplification of voices on the causes folks care about and that they're passionate about. And it's really helping to bring them to the forefront like we've never seen before. So let's dive into those online conversations a bit further for the sake of this research. So Bradley can go to the next slide. So let's start with our boomers. No surprise here that they are the generation most likely to support you all via traditional philanthropy. And over half of those that we surveyed through the Social State of Giving report have donated in the past year. So still ringing true that they're one of the most generous in terms of dollars, demographics, but they're really still looking for those more traditional ways to engage with you. It's probably not a lot of surprises there. And then next slide, when we get to Gen X, they still kind of share a lot of the same sentiment as boomers. So they kind of prefer to give via through the nonprofit. And we know that Gen X and the boomers are the ones who are who have at this moment in time the most wealth to give. So when you think about asking for individual gifts and larger gifts and things like that, those are the demographics you're going to target. Um, and so I also think it's interesting when you think of those two individuals, oftentimes when you're trying to create change within your organization. So maybe you're trying to unleash a new social media strategy, or you're trying to tap into influencers. It's always good to remind yourself and center yourself around who is my leadership team. If they happen to be Gen X or boomers, they may have a harder time with change and adopting some of these strategies. So just always a good reminder to think about your audience. Your younger people on your teams are going to get more excited about social sharing and some of the stuff that I talk about today because it's just so innate in their normal behaviors. But we can bring our boomers and our Gen X along. There's definitely, they definitely can come along if we just show them the way and get them excited. All right, so millennials, you can go to the next slide. When you start to look at this millennial group, you start to see that a direct relationship to a family member or friend takes almost equal measure to traditional philanthropy. And I think sometimes we discount millennials. So what that means is, as a millennial, as much as I care about or have an affinity for a nonprofit or a cause, it also really matters to me if my network, my friends and my family are also caring about a cause. I'm going to be much more likely to lean in there or want to learn more. So you're starting to see a shift when we get to our millennials. And then our last group, Gen Z, and even, at some point we'll be talking about Gen Alpha, the age group that all my kids are in, but this is really the hot topic right now. And Gen Z, this is where we start to see a platform like GoFundMe take a really strong hold. We see that they're looking to social media for inspiration as the majority follow an impact creator. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, or an influencer who is using their platform to do good on social media. So this is where you really start to see that shift in where they're researching and finding out about you. And if you haven't heard this, I always think this is shocking every time I hear this, but Gen Z is on par to become the wealthiest, generation by 2029. So in just a few short years, think about such a shift in spending power. So again, I went through all of those different age groups because when you think about your audience, you think about your strategies, you've got to start to think about, okay, if we know Gen Z is coming up and they're going to have a lot more giving power, how am I getting them engaged now in my mission? How am I thinking about them as a viable audience in just a few short years? And how am I helping boomers and Gen X really understand the important pieces of marketing and communications really shifting around how people find information nowadays? Okay, so you can go to the next slide. So, how is Gen Z influencing other generations? We're seeing a lot of influence happen here. And I know any marketers on the call are fascinated by Gen Z. Everybody's talking about this group. And we want to look at today how their influence is flowing into other generations. And what we're seeing that especially with millennials, and the things that they're doing is starting to even up and down the different age groups, starting to really have real influence there. You can go to the next slide. So this is like pretty powerful. If you take one thing away from this webinar today, it would really be this. What we found in our social state of giving data and research is that half of Gen Z are sharing causes or fundraisers on social media at least once a week. I mean, that is significant. That is a significant amount of sharing around causes that are meaningful to them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're donating every time they share or once a week if they're talking about, I volunteered at the Humane Society in my community this week and they're sharing that on social. It doesn't mean that there's always revenue tied to it. But what it is telling us is that that voice can be a really powerful ally in amplifying your cause and your mission to others. So it's that power of sharing that I think we've not really paid enough attention to as a sector. And this data is showing us that they're ripe, they're doing it. It's just a part, again, of their DNA and just how they engage in their communities. And then think about it, especially if Gen Z has coworkers, parents, family members, friends who are millennial or Gen X, they're really paying attention to what these younger folks are caring about and what they're sharing about. You can go to the next slide. And it's not just Gen Z. We can see that this also plays out amongst other generations. So through the report, we were pretty surprised to see that millennials and Gen X are also open to sharing, I think more than I maybe thought. And these cases, we see about half or even a bit more of these generations sharing more on a monthly basis rather than weekly, as much as these Gen Zs are on their phone and on social media. But it's still worth mentioning here that a monthly share is pretty significant. And so, in all of your calls to action and all of your campaigns and all of your communication, are you imploring folks to share? Are you making it easy to share? Are you making it part of the transaction or part of the process when it comes to interacting with your organization? You can go to the next slide. I want to talk a bit about impact creators, this term that I teased a few slides back. Impact creators is a term that's been coined to sort of mean this emerging genre of influencers who are using their platform to do good. And a big part of that includes giving to nonprofits or creating campaigns, fundraising on behalf of nonprofits. And so this, you think about the creator economy in general, there's this like subset of impact creators who are really using their influence for good. And I think this is a huge opportunity for those on the webinar and on the call today to think about differently. You can go to the next slide. So we asked a lot about impact creators in our report. We wanted to understand the level of engagement with these types of individuals, followership, all those types of things. And we found that the majority of people under the age of 42 already followed an impact creator. Again, kind of shocked by this. And then when I sat back and thought about it, I realized, oh, wow, I do follow an impact creator. So from my days at the American Heart Association, I've always cared about heart health, specifically congenital heart disease, and came across a TikToker by the name of JT Labor, and you'll have to look him up. He has maybe 500,000 followers on TikTok, but he's used that platform for good. So he has a whole heart series where he shares about his personal experience being born with a congenital heart defect and how it's impacted his life. And he's not only amplified the mission and the work of the American Heart Association, but has also raised money. And so I would implore you to think about if you're following an impact creator or if there's maybe impact creators that you'd want to start to follow and learn how they're doing this good work. You can go to the next slide. So the younger the respondents were, the more likely, obviously, they're going to be engaging with impact creators. So we know that older generations are less influenced to donate because of social, but there's still opportunity there. So if your organization had conversion rates like this, what would that mean for you? So these are folks that aren't just following along for the sake of following. They are following and waiting to engage. So do some of these formulas within your own organization. If, I have this many impact creators supporting my mission, and I know that my subset of donors, 68% of them are going to be following these impact creators, am I leveraging them for good and helping with donor acquisition and getting more people sort of engaged in the work that I'm doing? So impact creators are on the rise for sure. And then one other, just to take it another step, you can go to the next slide, is not only are Gen Z following these impact creators, they would actually trust them with their funds. So if an impact creator says, there's one that I was just reading about, a gentleman who's quitting his job, selling all of his belongings, and walking across the United States. So he's starting on the West Coast, and he's going to end up, I think, in Virginia. And he's doing it all to raise awareness and sort of break down stigma around men's mental health. So he himself, throughout this journey, is really open about his struggles with depression and thoughts of suicide. And I mean, he's like this very successful tech entrepreneur. So he's doing this walk across America to raise funds. And what's fascinating about it is he's going to raise $50,000, and he says, I'm going to support charities I care about around mental health. And he doesn't really give any more details than that. And he's already almost at his goal. So the point of that is, not only do I follow impact creators, I also trust them to do what they feel, see as best with the money that I'm giving. So it goes back to this like idea we keep hearing about: trust is changing. People are trusting corporations less, they're trusting nonprofits less, they're trusting people more. And so I think this really brings to life that not only are they following these impact creators, they're willing to donate, and that level of trust is increasing.
Michelle, we've
So
got
I think, oh, yeah,
do you mind if I
please.
interrupt you for a second on this
No,
topic? We've
please.
had quite a few questions and I had jotted down a few myself.
Sure.
But like how do you think organizations can go about getting engaged with impact creators and things like that? Because I think yeah, there's few comments here, but some people have been like, how do you find and engage? But I think there's also something about the authenticity around an impact creator kind of create finding the organizations that you mentioned JT, who personally has his own I follow him as well, but like he has his
Mm,
own, heart issues himself, and so that's very close to his, you know, him as a passion and things like that. But like, how how do you have any tips or advice about how an organization could maybe get plugged in with individuals, and maybe they're not an impact creator yet, maybe they're
yeah.
a person who just has a big following, who's an influencer, but
Yes. Great point.
how do you go about that?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think about it in a few different ways. I think like starting within my organization, I would certainly just start by having these conversations, like get together a brainstorming session, like involve the people that are going to get excited about this and sit around the room and start to just sort of whiteboard who within our existing network, who's showing up to our events, who's opening our emails, who's on our board, who's been donating. Start with that, sort of group and then start to think about casting a wider net. But I think internally, I would sit down and bring a group together and say, like, we've got some of these people within our network. We've just maybe never thought about them in this way. And so, first, starting there, get your team involved, get people weighing in, start to prospect, for lack of a better word. And to your point, it may not be an impact creator yet, but it could be someone somewhat aligned with what you do. And can we, flip that switch and get them excited about using their followership for good? And so there's a couple different, tactics there. We just had this come to life with the Tim Tebow Foundation, where we were talking about this at one of our visits with them on site, and we started to just think, okay, Tim Tebow is like heavily rooted in religion, heavily rooted in sports, heavily rooted in child sex trafficking. So, who within those sort of pillars and swim lanes can we start to think about who may bubble up and start to do some of this work for us, or start to think about deploying a strategy like this if we've never done it before? So, you may have another athlete that Tim is friends with who's willing to do some of this. You may have a mom influencer that has a huge following on TikTok that has made mention of, child sex trafficking being something they're really passionate about. And so I think of it a bit like donor acquisition. It's sort of the same approach. You're going to try different channels. You're going to think about it in all different ways, depending on who you're going after. And then the other piece is, I think instead of always just asking for money, which we do a lot, is like changing the asks to be a bit around this type of stuff. Like, would you open your network? Would you help us co-create content? Would you share our work on your channel? So I think even just changing the way that we interact to not always think the biggest win of the day, like we're so driven by our budgets and reaching certain goals, and that's all super important, but like some of our goals should also be reach and engagement and new audiences and all of those things. So I hope that answers the question, or at least gives you some thought starters.
No, I think that's really great. And I think, a point that we're kind of both circling around a little bit too is like, think about the adjacent topics or the topics that are close to that people may just be creating content around that for just entertainment purposes, right? And again, it's not necessarily for good yet, but they hold the same sort of opinions and or morals or whatever that your organization holds or belief system. And I would recommend that part of that would be like, we have a lot of respect for your platform. As you reach out, really go, the thing is you got to make an ask, just like any, like going after
Mm-hmm.
major donors and things like that.
Yep.
But what these individuals may be able to donate, to Michelle's point, is not so much around monetary. They might be able to do that also, but their impact about sharing your organization and the impact you're making that's close to their heart, right? Like, and so I think the ask might not be, will you just open up to our network? I ask might be more something around, could we share some of the things that we're doing? Could we introduce you to our organization and the work we're doing and have a conversation about that? And then make that ask after you share that information. Because I think the one thing that most of these creators really do is they do protect their audiences. Like they're very, they know
Mhm.
they've built trust, and so they want to make sure that the things that they're endorsing or whatever they feel strongly about. So taking the time to introduce the work you're doing and making sure that you believe it's going to resonate with them based on the content they're already creating and stuff like that, would be a really great first step. And I think that's if you can't get a yes if you don't ask. So I think that's approaching some of these individuals, whether they're already impact creators, would turn themselves that or not, or just social media influencers, is really interesting. I'll let you keep going here. I've got a couple other questions, but they're not really on that topic, so I'll save them for the end. So
Yeah, and I think just, to add on a little bit more, I think the ask piece is so important. I think when you think about going to meet with a high net worth donor in your portfolio, or you're going to meet with a grateful patient, or you're going to go meet with a walk chair or a corporate sponsor, this should start to be a part of your questions. So start to just layer it into how you conduct meetings, how, exploratory questions. And I think one other thing I'll mention is it doesn't have to be anybody with a following. I think what this also brought to life for me in my past days, especially with these big, the American Hearts, the LLSs of the world, is a part of this also too is like the whole third party, them fundraising on your behalf. I think we've come a long way, and we still need to continue to think about that differently. And what I mean by that is usually when someone would say, "Oh, I want to raise money to support this organization," we would say, "That's great. Thank you so much. Here's like a toolkit. Here are the rules. Here's how we want you to do it." And not really giving that flexibility and that freedom and that creativity to say, like, well, what would that look like for you? The story about the gentleman I shared walking across the country, like that probably would never have come up in one of my conversations a decade ago. It would have been like, well, if you want to support the work that we're doing in mental health, this is how you do it, versus like, well, tell me what you're thinking. So I think and you can go to the next slide because I talk about that a little bit here, is like this idea of letting go of control and, managing your message and seeing that people want to make it their own, and impact looks different for everybody. And the way that they consume your message and share it with others is going to be different. But it goes back to what you talked about, that authenticity. Another thing too is as you start to engage on social, if you're commenting and liking and engaging with the people on social, you're also going to bubble up people that are thriving within those spaces, that are actively engaging with your organization, where maybe there needs to be another follow-up conversation because they're telling you this is how they like to engage with you. So that's another area to kind of, if you're not actively, it sounds silly, but like if you're not actively engaging with your folks on social, if you're thanking them for a comment or they were upset about something, like all these really great brands do really well. I always think of like Domino's does it really well. But I think taking that approach as well of like having active engagement, you're going to start to bubble up some supporters as well. All right, are we good to move on?
yeah,
Yes.
I think some
Okay.
of the other questions. There's definitely some
Yeah,
other
sure.
questions, but we'll get to those here in just a few minutes
Well,
and
I'm
make sure
almost
we
done,
some
so we'll
others.
have
Okay.
plenty of time to so one of like sort of our first ventures that we're really excited about when it comes to, again, making it as easy as possible for individuals to share on your behalf to these networks that they care about, is GoFundMe and Classy has the first industry meta integration, and it's just a start. So we were able to integrate GoFundMe and Instagram, and we launched last month Classy and Instagram integration. And so what this means is nonprofits or supporters can now share an organization's campaign to Instagram with just one click from the campaign page, or from the GoFundMe side, supporters are able to share a fundraiser that they created on your behalf with just one click to Instagram. So instead of back in the days when you did Facebook fundraising, it never really looked that pretty. It wasn't dynamic. You wouldn't see the totals changing. You wouldn't see progress metrics. Now, when shared to Instagram, the stories or posts themselves are going to show up more beautifully and polished. You're going to see that dynamic progress metrics. You're going to see those clear call to actions. And then probably the most important part is what this means with this integration is that you'll be able to avoid the current checkout process experience that's available on Meta today, which is the PayPal Giving Fund. And instead of that, you'll go directly to using Classy and using our checkout experience. So donors will hit the donate button on Instagram. They'll be directed to the nonprofit's Classy donation page. And what that means is then you all nonprofits will get access to that supporter data that we've never had before. That can obviously be used for future stewardship, cultivation, all those great things. So, more to come, more tools that we're developing when it comes to really amplifying social. But check out this social state of giving report. We'll put the QR code back up again. That's what I had for content. I really would love to answer any more questions or keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely going to have some time to do that. And like I said, I jotted down a couple questions I wanted to ask, and I'm sure we'll have some from the audience as well. Before everybody starts jumping off, through the Q&A standpoint, I did want to take just a moment we're going to pop up a survey here. If you're interested at all learning more about Classy, about Feathr, or about both of us, feel free to just submit an answer here. If not, no worries. But if you'd like to learn about either of our platforms, feel free to just jot down which one you'd be interested in and or both. And we'll reach out and make sure we get some opportunity to go through the platform with you. And so I'm going to leave this up for just a minute to make sure people get a chance to ask those questions. If you're not familiar, I realize we spent quite a bit of time talking about Classy. If you're not familiar with Feathr, Feathr is a marketing platform built specifically for nonprofits to help automate touch points across ads, email, and social media. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can do that all within one platform, feel free to click the Feathr or both, and we'll be happy to share a little bit more about that with you. So Michelle, one quick question. And I'm sure you guys capture a little bit of this, but specifically, the Gen Z and millennials, where do you guys find that they're spending their time on social media? Like, what platforms are they using? Because I think, traditionally a lot of nonprofits kind of have their bases covered with Facebook. You're doing
Yeah.
pretty good if you have Instagram, and you might be really cutting edge, if you're over on TikTok or something like that. But like, from you guys' research, where are you guys seeing that individuals are spending their time?
Yeah, I love some of the webinar hosts or panelists are chiming in. But yeah, I think, definitely TikTok, LinkedIn, kind of depending on obviously more towards the millennial, still Instagram. And then, like my colleague Krista said here, we're seeing increasingly more on Reddit and Substack. But I think the audience got it right. Instagram, TikTok.
Okay. And then you did mention, and I don't know if you have these stats like readily available. I didn't see them in the slides, but you mentioned that like 51% of boomers have given in the last year. How does that play out across the younger generations in terms of how often they're giving in the last year? Do you have those percentages?
I don't have them off the top of my head. I don't know if Krista does or she can pull it up, but they're the highest, obviously. And I think even when we survey on like intent to give, they're usually the highest, especially when we went through like COVID and certain things in the economy. They'll usually maintain their giving. What we've seen, which is interesting, is like some of the younger generations have said that they're willing to forego and budget other things away so that they continue to give. So their giving is not as high as that 51%, but the ones that are giving intend to give and not drop that giving, just depending on what's happening with the economy, like I said. But it's boomers give it the highest, and then as you can imagine, it gets lower as you go younger. And then it's sort of the opposite as far as like engagement and showing up on social. It's like the complete opposite.
I'm gonna make sure we go back to the beginning here so that
Oh, yeah, thank
QR
you.
code's back up in case anyone wants to scan that. Um, all right, let's see. If there's any other questions from the audience here, I know, there's a lot of interest again in um, the kind of impact creators. I'm kind of scanning through some of the questions here.
There was one around, this comes up a lot, is Lindsay asked, which I think is a great question, is this idea of like paid, how much are impact
Yeah.
creators getting paid? And not to open a can of worms, but it's like worth talking about because I think there's a difference in opinions. If you're a creator and that is your job, I've really read more and more that like, the respect should be that a creator should be paid. You shouldn't be asking them to do things for free. So I think when it comes to an impact creator, I think it's no different than, you know, this is sort of positioned as their philanthropy, their generosity, knowing that if they're showing up in other ways, there's that expectation to be paid. But I wouldn't want people to go into any conversations blind. There are going to be creators that they're going to expect to be paid if you're asking them to promote your nonprofit. And so it can get sticky and complicated, but I think it's a great question. And certainly something I've been hearing a lot of is like, what is that expectation and how do we manage expectations?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I did see that someone had asked that, and I think by default, I kind of think about if they care a lot about the mission that they would hopefully be willing to donate and or part of their generosity being. But I think it's a good point that that's also part of how they make their income. And so like if you're having an event and you want to have a big speaker come talk at your event, you may oftentimes have to pay them to come
Exactly. Yep.
use their time. And so
Yep.
similar, I think it wouldn't be a far stretch to think about if it aligned well to not be offended if someone asked for a payment in return for the promotion of, the organization or something like that. Krista did point it out. It's kind of interesting that 30% of Gen Z had given to a charitable cause, 39% of millennials, and 38% of Gen X. So, those younger generations are giving a little bit less, but they're also so much more engaged in social media. So the fact that them giving to you made such a good point about it doesn't have to be a massive influencer that can be an impact creator or that can make an impact by sharing. I think
Yeah.
I saw recently, that the average person has like 500 friends on social media or something like that. So you just get a few people to share what's going on or share a cause can make a big impact in terms of the scale of who they're reaching and how much people um, support some of that. Sophia had a really good question. Did you guys ask, or were there any stats about how the younger generations are giving? Like, are they giving more through monthly
Yeah.
giving or anything like that that was interesting about
Yeah.
younger generations there?
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, I think, anecdotally, yes, you could say that, um, again, that the older the generation, the larger the gifts. I mean, that's the whole donor pyramid, which we're trying to get away from. So, anecdotally, yes, you can say Gen Zs are going to make smaller gifts. But something that's been really amazing that we've been able to bring to our customers at Classy and GoFundMe is something called intelligent ask amounts. Because we're sitting on between Classy and GoFundMe, truly the largest, most unique donor data set, we're able to empower our customers on their donation pages to use that data and those insights to put the right ask in front of the right donor at the right time. So, let's use me as an example. I'm going to go to give, we'll stick with the Tim Tebow Foundation. I'm going to go give a gift because of my behaviors and all the data that's been gathered around geography and age and all of that stuff. The amounts and my experience would look different than yours, Bradley. So they might know because of my data that I'm more likely to be a recurring donor. So that's going to come to the forefront of my giving experience. I might have to opt out of recurring and intentionally make a one-time gift, but they're trying to nudge me to be recurring because that's what the data tells them. Or let's say it's a donor who, historically has made pretty large gifts to your organization. You wouldn't want to maybe put the same gift amounts that you put in front of your everyday donor. You're going to leave money on the table. So maybe those suggested amounts are bumped up higher. So maybe the smallest amount that's going to show up is $250 rather than $25. So we've seen a huge lift at end of year giving. All of our organizations raised, 5% more just deploying something as simple as turning on intelligent ask amounts. So it goes back to anything. Data is like the new oil. It's the superpower of truly understanding who's supporting us. And so, yeah, I would share that with you. But that's a great question.
That's a really cool feature. And so that's all happening dynamically when someone visits. The system is understanding what their past giving behavior has been, or maybe what their giving behavior has been across other organizations, and being able to optimize the giving experience for that individual donor in real time on the page so that they get asked, to your point, someone who has the propensity to give a higher amount based on any number of factors maybe asked for a larger amount than someone who has maybe been the default amounts for a first time visitor or something like that.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it's really cool.
That's great. Okay. You called this out in here, but also if you're I know we'll be at the Classy Collaborative, and we're really excited to be there. It's some of the best content. I've been in the sector for about 7 years and been a couple times, and it's some of the most forward thinking content I think that's out there in terms of what you can go to an event and get. And so really excited to be there. If we don't have any other questions, I think we can give some time back. Michelle, do you have any other parting thoughts before we step away?
Thank you for those kind words about collaborative. I mean, I'm biased, but I really feel the same. And I am truly the conference queen here at Classy. I'm at all the conferences, and ours really is sort of a departure, and we really try to keep it fresh. And we call it like the unconference. So if you're able to join, please mark the dates on your calendar. I included the link to learn about registering. It's an amazing event. And find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect. If you want to talk about this more or have other questions that I wasn't able to answer, find me. Happy to support you guys and talk about this more. But just really appreciate you guys having me. And we love our partnership with Feathr and appreciate all the great work you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate so much making time for us, even while you're at ANA. Make sure you say hi to the Feathr team for us, and have a good rest of the conference. Thanks for everyone who came and spent a little bit of time with us. Hope you got some good information out, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot, Michelle.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.